When I think of the word hood, I think of a person, a place, and perhaps even a thing. I'm Sir Crepsta, and welcome to Middleborough County Ghost Stories from the Hood Shorts. So, sit back, relax, and grab up your snacks, and be terrified by the stories that I'm about to share with you. In 2022, Randall had taken up work at the local hospital's Environmental Services Department, working second shift. But when immediately started the job, he had overheard some of his co-workers talking about how the entire hospital was rumored to be haunted. One night, Randall was asked by a supervisor to go down into the morgue and sweep and mop and perhaps wax and even buff the entire floor if need be. So, Randall gathered up his cleaning supplies and went down into the morgue. Once arriving at the morgue, Randall quickly noticed two corpses lying on the tables inside the cold room. Trying his best to do his job and get the hell out of there, Randall noticed the doorknob to the morgue frantically turning back and forth. Thinking to himself there was a co-worker trying to get in, Randall shouted out to him, asking him who was at the door, but no one replied. All along, the doorknob continued to turn rapidly. Then the shaking of the knob just stopped. Once this happened, Randall swung open the door, looked down both sides of the hallway, and saw nothing. This would be all Randall needed to believe in the paranormal and that the hospital was in fact haunted. Afterwards, he put in his 2 weeks resignation, never stepping foot back inside the hospital's morgue ever again. Belinda, her fiancé, and her youngest child, Omarion, had moved from a small house to a very spacious trailer around the year 2000. Not long after the move, Omarion, an avid lover of Thomas the Train, had a flurry of horrifying nightmares where it appeared that while dreaming, he was trying to keep something off of him. These nightmares would suddenly awaken Belinda in the wee hours of the morning, finding her son fighting like crazy in his dreams to keep someone or something away from him. Shaking it off at first, as perhaps being a natural development that kids tend to go through, she and her fiancé simply went on with a daily routine in turning their spacious trailer into a lovely home. It wasn't until one night, resting in the living room, that Belinda would know for sure that whatever it was going on in her home was not just focused on Omarion alone. While sitting in the living room, reading a book, Belinda noticed a small vibration coming from underneath the trailer. As she sat there trying to make sense of the sudden movement underneath the trailer, it only intensified, shaking so violently that for a second, Belinda thought that she was in the midst of a mini earthquake. Then, as suddenly as the shaking started, it stopped, and the house became silent. All of a sudden, Belinda heard a yell come from Omarion's room. She dashed down the hall to the room and saw her son once again fighting off a large black mass of something. Grabbing her son up, Belinda ran through the house, out the door, and jumped into her car, heading to her parents' house. The next day, her father and his sons went to the house, gathered up as much of her and her son's belongings as they could, and left the trailer as quickly as they could. Belinda would move out of the trailer soon after, and never stepped foot back into the trailer again. It was opening for rifle season for all of the hunters seeking to take down the prize buck. Claude is saved for a while, and had purchased a brand new high-powered rifle. For the past 5 years, he had come up short with the $500 annual bet the group of friends would participate in, trying to kill the biggest buck during rifle season. Eager to be the winner of the prize this year, Claude and one of his friends went out into the woods located by the train depot and went about building a deer stand large enough to withstand the weight of both of them. Once the stand was complete, the two of them climbed into the stand around midnight in hopes of catching the early morning deer moving through. Around 4 a.m., the man with Claude would awaken Claude, telling him that he thought he heard some movement in the woods, so he better grab his rifle just in case it was a big one coming through. As the two of them sat there, they both noticed that suddenly, for reasons unknown, it had gone extremely quiet in the woods, which is usually a sign that a large predator was somewhere nearby. This was quickly followed up by what smelled like a musky dog scent that took over all the air. As they sat there, guns drawn, a large bipedal figure slowly made its way through the dark woods, snapping the branches on the ground so hard they sounded like firecrackers going off. As the figure neared Claude and his friend, all they could do was sit there and listen to their hearts beating simultaneously, so loud it sounded like marching band drums. Then, for reasons unknown, the creature stopped in his tracks, stood there for what felt like an eternity to the two of the hunters, and then slowly turned and walked away, back through the woods, across the creek, until it was out of sight. At that moment, frightened to death, Claude and their friend leapt out of the stand, leaving everything behind, and ran back to their truck. It wouldn't be until the next afternoon that the two of them would go back into the woods to retrieve their guns and all of their belongings, forever vowing never to return to that section of the woods to deer hunt ever again. The year was 1977. Wallace and his friends had just finished up a long game of basketball when Wallace decided to run home and grab him a quick bite to eat, and then return back to the park to play a few more games. While at home, in the midst of making a bologna sandwich, Wallace heard a knock on the front door of his home. So he put his sandwich down and went into the living room to see who it was. Wallace opened up the door, and to his surprise, no one was there. This seemed odd to Wallace at first, but being so hungry, he shook it off and went back into the kitchen to finish making his sandwich. But before he could get the meat on the bread, he heard the knocks coming from the front door again. Starting to get a little bit upset at this point, Wallace stormed out of the kitchen, back into the living room, and jerked open the door, only to once again find no one there. By now, Wallace was furious and had begun to think it was just his badass friends playing tricks with him. So he opened up the door, went down the steps, did a complete walk around of the entire house, only to see no one. At this point, Wallace was starting to wonder what the actual hell was going on. So he went back into his house, finished making his sandwich, and just as he was about to take a huge bite, the knocking could be heard yet again, coming from the front door. By now, Wallace had had enough, so he struck out running toward the door. With blood in his eyes and anger in his heart, he slung open the door and yet again saw nothing but an old van parked in his drive that he knew for certain hadn't been there each time he'd opened the door the times before. Suddenly, from the driver's side of the van, he heard something or someone start to laugh out loud in a voice he'd never heard before. The laugh scared him so bad that it sent cold chills all over his body. As he watched the wicked van back out of the drive and turned down the road towards the old fairgrounds, he could still hear the creepy laughter echoing in the air as the van drove down the road and seemingly vanished into thin air. Wallace gathered himself and struck out running back to the park. When he got there, he immediately started sharing his horrifying experience with his friends. Then out of nowhere, Flip would tell Wallace that he had overheard his mother on the phone speaking with a relative in Greenville. And she had told his mother that the same thing had recently happened to a family there, and whatever or whoever it was in the van had also scared the holy shit out of them. After that incident with Wallace and the family from the other town, nothing was ever heard of about the mysterious van with the laughing entity again. That's all for tonight, folks. I hope you enjoyed these stories. I look forward to sharing many more with you. And for now, I'm Sir Crepsta, and until next time, stay terrified.